Okay, welcome back everyone to Summer School E-Commerce Edition. I'm Christina, your host, and today I'm joined by Colette and the Airwallex team. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Perfect. I'm Colette. I'm here at Airwallex in our San Francisco office, sort of focusing today on a bit about global expansion. So I'm on our partnerships team, meaning I work with different partners in order to support growth and support merchants as they start to scale. So a lot of e-commerce operations and a lot of e-commerce expansion into different markets. So I wanted to touch today on a few things. First, the cost of international e-commerce. If you're familiar, it can get quite expensive in a couple different ways, time and money. We'll talk a little bit about the conversion trap, what cross-border fees can look like and how to minimize those, and then how to simplify your e-commerce operations. Lastly, I'll touch a little bit about playbook in action, so how can you get started? So that's our agenda for today, and I'll kick it off quickly. So just a brief overview. Expanding into international e-commerce is not optional anymore, right? It's really necessary in order to reach all of the different marketplaces that you can sort of touch on. As you think about it, over half of global online shoppers buy from overseas retailers. I know I'm shopping online. I'm seeing something on Instagram and it's from a global operator, right? It's from a company that's operating in a different market, but I still want that item. So how can we make sure that that's accessible? That's going to be international expansion. When we look at payments and when we look at where we focus on that payment side of things, sometimes that means higher rates of failed payments when it comes to cross-border transactions. So how can we think about them locally or domestically, even with the lack of international presence as you're starting to scale? So that's where we're going to focus today. So looking at the entire space, right, $250 trillion is the expected market size for cross-border payments in 2027. So 94% of shoppers expect to buy in their local currencies. So when I go on a website, no matter where it is in the world, I'm hoping to see USD. I'm hoping to see my credit card type. And I would assume that other people in other countries would feel the same. So 80% of businesses believe that cross-border payments or accepting international payments is important for growth. And a lot of them are looking for ways to make cross-border payments happen. And it might be one of you. So when you think about it becoming more and more impactful for your growth, a lot of complexity can occur. So, risk of fraud, slow processing, high cost, and just the regulations that take place when you move to a new market. So those are some of the, opportunities here, but also the potential friction points. When we look at how to simplify all of those friction points, these are the three main topics that we hear from a lot of our merchants and a lot of our sort of like e-commerce operators. So driving revenue and growth, right? You want to be able to offer all the payment methods needed and expand to new markets while also seeing everything in one place. You want to make sure you have access to what's going on, what transactions are taking place and where, while reducing cost. So lastly, with improving payment flow. So as you start to scale, you start to need different providers. Then all of a sudden your checkout experience has a lot of different steps. So how can you make sure to keep everything consolidated and keep things simple even as you're scaling and getting more and more complex buyers? So next, I want to touch a little bit lastly on the cost of international e-commerce when it comes to literal financials, right? So you don't really think about the entity setup cost, and then you have compliance fees. Sometimes you need to go to the region you want that bank account in, show up there. Over half of businesses are required to show up to that branch to open a bank account. So you start to acquire a lot of different fees, and they all start to stack one on top of another, and it can get really, really expensive to move to a new market. So I kind of want to talk about how you can start to consolidate that, how we've seen some of our merchants do it in the past, and sort of avoid that conversion trap. So if you're not familiar with the conversion trap, it is this idea that every international dollar you generate is converted twice. This isn't always the case, but oftentimes it's overlooked, and it's a huge way that you're losing on revenue. So, for example, let's just say I'm a US business and I sell Italian olive oil. So, my Italian olive oil is sent to me by my supplier, who I pay directly. When a customer comes in from France and they purchase my Italian olive oil that's in the US for my US business, they're going to be paying with euros. I take those euros and I have to convert them into USD for my bank account. Yikes, lost 1 or 2, maybe more, 3% on that FX exchange, settling it into my bank account. From there, I need to pay my supplier who's in Italy for that local olive oil. So I send it back. That's going to be another 2-3% on that foreign exchange transfer. That is going to cost me a lot of revenue and my margins are going to slowly decrease. That's the conversion trap, and it happens a lot to small to medium businesses, especially as they're operating internationally. So how can you help prevent those conversion traps? As you start to think about moving into, UK, Great British pounds, and then you want to operate USD and Hong Kong dollars, sure, you can start paying those fees. If you want to start minimizing those fees and you want to start operating in that market, you can start setting up that legal entity, right? You can get the legal entity set up, find a banking partner, open a bank account, and then get an acquirer to process that payment. That's another great alternative, but you're going back to the same problem of having to pay those fees in order to get set up in that market. So it can be a costly process, and it could be a really, really cyclical problem that you start to face as you're overcoming those international barriers and overcoming those international pain points. We noticed this for a few of our clients. For example, GOAT. If you're familiar with the brand, you've probably seen that they operate in over 170 countries. They are a luxury apparel and shoe store. Dangerous website. If you want to look it up, you might get hooked and you might buy something. They were struggling because as they started to scale and move into different countries, they started to have to add on different processors to support their international payments. So things started to become really fragmented. Alongside that, they end up having to transfer money in the payments lifecycle to sellers. They had to accept money from buyers, all in different currencies, which ended up costing a lot of their margin. Lastly, when it comes to global spending, those manual processes started to become more and more extensive. So you're thinking about reconciliation and how much of an uplift in time investment that is. When you start to get all these different currencies in different markets, it can become really, really sticky. So what we were able to do was consolidate. We were able to access global coverage for them and able to collect and pay out into the funds needed through like a multi-currency wallet. What we have here allows them to keep those funds in the initial currency they came in so that you're lowering those conversion fees and they're not forced like that conversion trap I showed earlier. We can also enable different payment methods, and we were able to do it for GOAT. So when I log in, I can see the currency that I'm expecting to pay in and the preferred payment methods that I'm hoping to pay for this item in. Lastly, thinking about holding the revenue in the currency that we got it in, and then we paid it in. So as GOAT continues to scale, they don't need to think about all of the different FX fees that are going to happen as they accept and pay their sellers. So how do you get started, right? How does the playbook begin? When you think about where to start, it can become super overwhelming. So we recommend first that you start to research and prepare. So think about the most high demand and which market that is. Where are shoppers coming and where is that churn falling? Look at the regulatory landscape and figure out what the demand is and where we can get started. So if customers are starting to show up from Canada and want to spend their Canadian dollars, but they notice that that currency and that type of payment method isn't available, how can you get that up and running? It might be looking into tax requirements or consumer protection in those countries. It could also just be looking at the localization of that market. So, for us in the US, sometimes it's credit card. If my type of credit card isn't there, most likely I'm going to log off. I might just go find that somewhere else. Whereas in another market, they might be looking for their local payment methods. So if you're in the Netherlands, you're looking for Ideal, right? There's all these different payment methods, and we need to make sure that we're supporting the ones that we want to scale into. When you think about holding and managing funds as well, whatever currency you've accepted, it might be nice to keep it in that currency. So instead of using that Canadian dollar and converting it to USD and then back to pay out to ad spend or to a supplier, it might be nice to keep all of the multi-currencies where they're at and then use them as needed. So that'll help save on conversion. It'll also help speed things up because you already have that currency and it can be a local transfer at that point. Lastly, we always recommend to look at local experts. So partnering with people who know the market or who know that type of space really well can allow for you to scale really, really quickly without needing to invest all of the time to show up and make that bank account or to even just invest in the research. You know, people have spent many, many years understanding specific markets. So if you can get their expertise, it can allow you to support compliance and make sure that everything is up and running in the way that it needs to be to move into that market. Another example of this is a fitness event. So this is a fitness event where they host 80 or 90 runs of getting people together and going on a fitness adventure, right? So you can sign up, it's expanded globally, and they started to really grow in APAC. So as they did that, things became a little bit more complex. It's also time sensitive. You know, if you're running a race the next day, that payment needs to hit their bank account. So HYROX was suffering from slow, complex processes as they were scaling to each market. Same thing, they were having to open those local bank accounts, scale into that market, and even then, some international payment transfers would take a long time, a couple days, whereas they needed to make it happen sooner rather than later. Lastly, reconciliation again can be such a manual process. With Airwallex, we were able to consolidate everything for HYROX to open a multi-currency global account online. We did this within a day, and then all those transfers that were taking 3 days were done in 30 minutes. So being able to access those expertise or being able to access those local markets can allow for those international transfers to occur way more quickly. Seamless integrations with accounting software can also allow for easy reconciliation. So we were able to support HYROX through their global expansion, allowing not just one country and one area to experience this global run, but instead move it through APAC and beyond. So when we think about expertise in local markets, of course, there's a ton out there. The markets are never ending, right? And there's so many great opportunities to scale. We can really help with that in some regards. So when it comes to payment acceptance, when it comes to FX and global accounts, we can make this super simple by consolidating everything into one place. So when we think about e-commerce and payment acceptance, we can accept payments in multiple currencies, keep it in those currencies through our global account, store those funds, and then use them in transfers as needed. So instead of having to FX and convert those fees, convert those transfers or those payments, we can keep them in the currency that they were received in until that money is needed in that currency again to spend it. You can also add it onto a borderless card, virtual or physical, to use that for another use case, whether it be employee cards, ad spend, something like that. The benefit of this is minimizing all of those fees and making sure to benefit from all the local rails. So you're not having to use Swift transfers for everything. Instead, you can keep things consolidated into one backend and keep things local to the market like we talked about before. So when you think about expanding into international spaces and sort of moving your business beyond those local borders, it can be really, really challenging, but really exciting. Sometimes it can take a lot of investment. It can take time, it could take money, but I genuinely think by finding the correct partners and working with businesses who can really operate beyond those borders, you're able to expand quickly and for less cost. Being that we're able to operate in several different markets, there are different partners that you can go with in order to support those growth, but I really think finding the right infrastructure instead of just a back-end fix allows you to move quickly and allows you to scale as needed.
Awesome. Yeah, this is great. I mean, I kind of assumed that expanding internationally, of course, requires a lot of different steps, but I had no idea that all of this was required, especially having to go to each individual market. It just sounds like a lot. So if I'm listening and I see the opportunity, the numbers you show, right, that there's huge opportunity to expand beyond the borders, kind of what's your recommendation for someone to get in touch with your team and get started?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So, I think it's super helpful to get in touch with anybody from our team. We can always loop you to the right person, but you can reach out to me directly. My email's here in the bottom corner, along with all of the resources that I use to find the data here and present it today. So you can reach out to Colette Lewis, colette.lewis@airwallex.com with any questions you may have, with anything you want to follow up about. I'd love to chat.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. Well, I really enjoyed this one. I think as everyone that's been listening throughout the series, every day we're tackling a very unique and different part of your e-commerce ops, and it's really exciting to think about what it takes and the opportunities around international expansion. So, Colette, thank you for joining us. To the Airwallex teams, thanks for being part of this, and for everyone listening, we will be back tomorrow with the next session.
Thanks so much.
Everyone.